Final Destination released in 2000 alongside Saw, this movie often got thrown in with the birth of the early 2000s horror trend, splatter horror. The film was directed by James Wan, and that's not who you think it is. Oh my god, the guy who directed Saw and Aquaman? No, you racist piece of shit, that's James Wan! This is James Wan, not as popular in the horror scene. He has a few cult hits, this being one of them. If you haven't heard the story, it's about a student named Alex after he gets a premonition of the plane his class takes for their school trip blowing up, and he gets himself and a select few classmates taken off the plane. However, when the plane does blow up and it turns out Alex is right, turns out death is coming for him and the others. You get the formula pretty early with this entry. The main character and select friends escape death only for death to come back and try to kill each of them. I should talk about the cast since most fans say this is one of the better casts. Devon Sawa plays Alex, and with this being one of his biggest roles, he really sells it, making you believe he's in this predicament. Ali Larter, Kerr Smith, Amanda Detmer, and Sean William Scott all play the other character. What? Stifler is in this? Seems like he was everywhere between 1999 and 2005, and this is easily the role he stands out the most like a sore thumb.
Sorry I'm late.
Carter, I am not.
Young man, you're gonna die at a very young age.
Oh, you will be! You're dead! You're dead!
He was in the movie where the guy fucked a pie. I don't know how to take him seriously. For instance, the train scene. It's intense as hell and really well shot. Except for Stifler, he looks confused by almost every take. On that note, the deaths are incredibly intense and at times even deserved. I already mentioned at the beginning that there will be spoilers, but obviously there's the plane scene, which is absolutely iconic to the franchise. I'd argue without this being the opening scene, the series never would have gained recognition past the first movie. Todd's death is upsetting more than anything, and also you can see it as a supernatural death. Water does not move like that. Next you'll be telling me computers can just explode. I'm never touching my computer again. Honestly, the most iconic thing about this series is pretty much making you fear everything. They mark off a lot of the things you wouldn't be afraid of if this series didn't exist checklist. Carter has a fake-out death on the train tracks only to be the final death in the movie. Like, come on, Stifler is not convincing any- Oh shit! Oh my god, that's disgusting. I'm gonna have to censor a lot of this video. Of course, many have pointed out that Devon Sawa is pretty good as Alex. Though as a representative of the Alex community, I do not accept that his name is Alex. No Alex in history would ever be a pussy. And of course, the late great Tony Todd as Mr. Bloodworth. This movie in itself is amazing, but because of Todd's iconic performances throughout the series, it elevates to amazing. Overall, I think there's a reason this one gets as much recognition as it does. The acting for the most part is pretty good, and the kills are iconic, and it definitely set up a mediocre as fuck sequel.
So who's next?
Okay, I'll go ahead and say I don't hate Final Destination 2. Hell, the most iconic scene from the movie is on my thumbnail, but to say the least, I wasn't too big on it. This one came out 3 years later in 2003 and was directed by David R. Ellis instead of Wong. This stars AJ Cook as Kimberly for our lead, whose premonition saves herself and multiple survivors in a highway accident, and one of the most iconic scenes in the series next to the plane crash from the last movie. Of course, like with Alex and his friends, death comes for Kimberly and the survivors. Something I'll go ahead and say as an improvement is Kimberly over Alex. I didn't mind Alex and Devon Sawa did great, but AJ Cook must have had rent due because she puts everything into this. She makes you truly believe her friends just died horrifically after trying to save them. I also didn't mind some of the characters alongside, obviously, the return of Bloodworth. The biggest downgrade for me though was the deaths. After the log truck scene, there's nothing really that sticks with me like Todd's death or the final death in the first film. I didn't really know Tim in the movie, and his cartoony ass death didn't leave any impact on me other than Nora's reaction. Hell, Nora's death is probably the best one after the opening scene, only because it happens a little after her son's. Kat's death? I don't care. Brian's death is probably the best real death in the movie, only because of Miss Gibson's reaction. But here's my issue. In the first film, everyone who was important to the story were introduced on the plane, and they had more of a connection to Alex, making their deaths that much worse. Not only are the biggest connections to Kimberly killed off almost immediately, like right after the premonition scene, but the characters aren't that connected. They all share something, I guess, with how they all survived a horrible highway accident, but we don't get to know them like Carter, Billy, or even Clear, who comes back in this movie and also has somewhat of a crazy death. Like this guy, Eugene. You look at him and everything you get from his personality throughout the entire film is that he's the black guy who most likely dies. That is Terrence T.C. Carson, the original voice of fucking Kratos. Okay, I can't be mad that they didn't utilize him here because this came out 2 years before God of War. Obviously, him being Kratos wouldn't have been common knowledge to the filmmakers. But my problem is, they introduce him, we don't know him for long, and he dies. Tim, we know him for a few scenes, and he dies. It happens with about 70% of the main cast this time around. Thankfully, Bloodworth is a highlight as usual, and Kimberly herself, as I said, is great. Probably my favorite of the main characters. The rest? It seems they had an idea of where to go with the sequel, but not only does it feel a lot more disjointed than the first, I actually argue it's more boring. The deaths don't stick with me like they did in the first film. The first film had some crazy ass deaths, some that seemed both realistic, yet somewhat supernatural. As if Death himself is controlling the events, which is what is going on. Todd's death in the first film was incredible because Todd was a likable character whose death comes off as suicide, making him even more tragic when it turns out that wasn't the case. Even for all the shit I give Sean William Scott, he does try enough to make Billy interesting before he dies. Here, I don't care about Tim or Eugene or even Clear. I liked Clear in the first film, but she's not that interesting in this one. For everything else, the premonition is iconic, and occasionally a death hits hard, but it's clear this one had the right idea, but a weak execution. Oh, right, gotta check off some of the checklist. Locked trucks, yep. Falling objects, yep. Vehicles exploding, yep. This is the one that often gets the most mixed reaction. Fans of the first two don't care for it, while new fans often really like it. I think it's actually pretty good. This might be a guilty pleasure, but I really do like this one. Following Wendy, who's not as good as Kimberly or Alex, but not bad either, as she has a premonition of her and, what else, a group of strangers dying on a big roller coaster called Devil's Flight. Jesus, what happened to subtlety? And make sure you keep your arms, legs, and appendages inside the vehicle at all times. Thank you for writing, you're gonna die, you stupid bitch. Let me the fuck off. Of course, her freaking out causes her and a group of randoms to be escorted off the ride, but in turn, she cheats death and death is after all of them. First of all, roller coasters, yep. What I do like about this movie over the last is that it keeps the characters that are important confined to the premonition. It doesn't make it so that the characters are all scattered throughout and have no connection. These characters, for the most part, do know each other. And you thought I was overdramatic about the goofy-looking deaths from the last film? This film goes in on it. The deaths are so over the top and goofy at times, it makes for a more entertaining time, mostly because all these characters in one way or another aren't the most likable. While the main two are fine, Frankie did nothing but be a douche. Hell, his camera's the reason the whole premonition played out the way it did. I didn't care if he died, but when he did... Sweet censorship. Why did I choose to do horror movies? Lewis is a dick. He starts mocking Wendy after a panic attack, so yeah, when he dies, oh, never mind on that gym membership. The problem stems from a similar issue with the second movie. We really don't get to know about these characters. We know Frankie's an inconsiderate douche who thinks bringing a camcorder on a roller coaster is a good move. To be fair, this was 2006, iPhones didn't exist yet, it's kind of like recording a fight with a laptop. But as I said, it's the deaths that make this movie memorable. Frankie gets his skull drilled into right after flipping our leads off. Lewis gets his head bashed in at the gym. There's a tanning bed death that's straight up gone down in Final Destination Infamy. Tanning beds, really? Ian gets crushed by something after fireworks try to hit him. God damn it! My only real issue that doesn't revolve around the side characters is the main character. As I said, Wendy isn't as interesting as, say, Alex or Kimberly. Also, she doesn't even have a connection to half of these characters. Hell, half these characters hate her for such petty reasons. Cause they didn't get to ride the Fist of Pain? She saved your lives. Why does she even care about these people? They're all dicks. Ian straight up says, yeah, Kimberly, you're next, bitch. And then dies Looney Tunes style. Why does she even care about these people? They're clearly cocky enough to think death will never come for them, only for death to immediately come for them. But something I do have to acknowledge is that for the most part, these events occur after the characters show off how cocky they are and how they're not going to be at death's doorstep. Frankie is pretty confident with how a truck barreling towards our leads won't affect him at all. Has he ever seen a car crash? Lewis literally just avoids death, gets cocky, keeps working out, and gets his skull bashed in. Ian narrowly avoids fireworks impaling him, gets cocky just enough to where that pole going up his ass is looking real nice about now. I do like that even if these characters don't have the connection to Wendy the way that Alex had connections to his friends or Kimberly, fair enough, they make them just douchey enough to where even Grimm is saying, oh, I know you ain't mocking Wendy. Mama say mama saw mama goose. So yeah, while it's certainly messy and Wendy isn't nearly as interesting as the last two leads, I still have a soft spot for it, and all of its goofy charm.
Baby, I just win!
In 2009, David R. Ellis returned to direct the fourth Final Destination film, The Final Destination. That title blows chunks. Okay, I should say that David R. Ellis sadly passed away in 2013. I'm not just gonna say his Final Destination movies are the ones that suck. How could I hate on the guy who directed Shark Night, Cellular, Snakes on a Plane, Homeward Bound 2, and the worst Final Destination film in the entire franchise? Okay, so while I can't quite say The Final Destination is even one of the worst horror movies I've ever watched, of all 6 movies, it's the one I enjoyed the least. This time, the premonition has Nick and his friends at a racetrack. My father used to work in NASCAR for David Gillian. Guess my love for NASCAR's out the window. And of course, he's able to get him and his friends out before it happens, and death ain't having none of that. Also, gotta love that the stock car stadium, which notably has a lot of protection for moments like this, suddenly has walls of wet mud. Okay, so something I'll go ahead and say, the effects started looking weird around the second movie. Not only do these effects suck, but you'll probably notice an issue if you've ever seen a film in theaters in 2009. No! The height of the 3D Renaissance, movies specifically made for 3D viewing. Considering such, looking at some of these effects without the worst accessory you can wear in a movie theater, it looks pretty bad. But okay, let's go through the major deaths after the premonition. Carter Daniels is pretty funny as he gets dragged through the street by his tow truck and fucking explodes. Tow trucks and streets! Oh, 2 for 1! Just listen to what Samantha says.
I've got my eye on you two.
I hope she loses a foot. Okay, that works too. Andy's death is pretty sad as he says the iconic "guess I'm not next" line. Oh shit, I'm next. Though his death is so fake looking, I don't want to take the risk though. Hunt's death is just silly. He gets sucked into the bottom of the pool and gets disemboweled through the ass. George gets absolutely obliterated by an ambulance. Oh, the irony. Also, ambulance is checking it off the list. And the ending kills off the remaining 3 main characters with this weird X-ray animation. Really? You have these effects and just now thought to do something different? Feels more like one of those X-ray moments from Mortal Kombat.
Fatality.
These characters just die. Optimus Prime must have been like Starbucks. So a few issues with this one. First off, I'm sorry, this main character is boring. And the other characters are kind of on the same boat of the second film's characters. I don't have any time to figure out which of these characters I want to die and want to live, or for some, why they deserve to die. The only one I was like, damn, they really didn't make it to the end without some bullshit, huh? Was George dying in the ambulance. Sure, it's ironic that a vehicle meant to save people killed a character off, but it happens out of nowhere, and of course it's the black guy. Now that's just plain racist. Or should I say, plain racist. Oh, fuck's sake, that's actually worse. The problem isn't even that the characters aren't memorable. This time, even the deaths themselves are kind of hit or miss. Only like 2 stick with you, if that. It's the only film in the entire franchise that I just didn't care about. And clearly, the film didn't care about the characters as they all just die by the end. It's so unimportant that it's actually the only Final Destination where Tony Todd isn't in it. And Todd had claimed multiple times how he loved this franchise, so I cannot fathom how one film is just so nothing that even the legendary Tony Todd didn't want to come back for it. I don't think it's an egregiously bad film, but considering the other highs for this franchise, it's certainly the lowest low. In 2011, Final Destination 5 released, intending to be the last film in the franchise. And as potential last films go, I think it delivers fine. This was the only one of the 5 films not to feature James Wan or David R. Ellis as the director, but instead features Stephen Quayle, who also directed, he's not the best, but I think Final Destination 5 is fine. This time we follow Sam as he has a premonition that he and his co-workers will die on a collapsing bridge. God, fuck! However, he's able to get himself and a group of survivors out of death's way, and you know the drill. I'll go ahead and say the bridge premonition is my second least favorite of all these, as I felt the racetrack was just a little campier. This one's effects are really cheesy, and if I were to place a number in a letter, yeah, you can definitely tell this movie was made with 3D in mind. Such, if you were to watch this movie just normally and not get cinema's greatest pink eye supplier for a few extra bucks, these effects suck. Thankfully though, a few upgrades from the last film. First, the premonition's cool enough, honestly. Bridges are a naturally scary thing, so it makes sense to take advantage of that. See, that's what all these movies did. Even the 4th film I'll give, each movie's premonition played into a fear most people had lingering but completely amplified it. Like, let's face it, anyone who's drove behind a log truck, rode a roller coaster, gotten on a plane, you secretly think, what if fucking everything went wrong? That's what these premonitions do so well. It takes what's just a lingering fear and makes it so insanely real. And thankfully, the fun carries over into the deaths. Even though the effects can sometimes be distracting, they don't happen every scene. Candace's death is perfect build-up, absolutely insane. Also, I was already scared of nails in the feet, as I better add it to the list. The acupuncture death, god damn it. Olivia's death, eye doctors, really? Roy's death, damn it, I work with a crane, yep. Dennis's death, oh my god, wrenches? And of course, I have to talk about what is definitely one of the craziest twist endings to a horror movie. It ends with Sam and Molly boarding a flight, and guess what? There's a scene where a woman asks a flight attendant about a kid who had a panic attack and was escorted off the plane. This kid was Alex from the first movie. The entirety of Final Destination 5 is a prequel to Final Destination. And Sam was an unlucky bastard who was on Flight 180. It's pretty smart how death comes full circle, and that's pretty damn clever, and I gotta give the writers that. When they do something creative in this franchise, it often leaves an impact. The rest of the film is, by God, completely okay. I wasn't really invested like with the first or third films, and the effects definitely take you out at times. But you know what? Effects can be given some slack as long as it's entertaining. I would definitely say for its flaws, Final Destination 5 comes full circle.
Life's a bitch.
So I'm not going to go too into detail for this one since it just came out as of writing this, and it'll only be for a single week when this video does come out. With that said, Holy crap! Not only is this the single best horror movie I've watched this year, but it's the best Final Destination since the first one. Hell, I think this one does a few things a little better than the first. Following a young woman named Stephanie as she starts having a recurrent nightmare regarding a woman named Iris dying alongside hundreds of others at the Skyview, a new restaurant that's just asking for people to die on it. Of course, this turns out to be deaths showing Iris's premonition to Stephanie because Iris is her grandmother. Yep, big reveal, it was kind of obvious, but she goes back home to her family, including her brother Charlie and her cousins Eric, Bobby, and Julia. Specifically, she needs to find her grandmother Iris explaining the premonition to her. And after a few more deaths in the family, it's up to Stephanie, Charlie, and the cousins to cheat death and find a way to stop him. Once again, the premonition slapped. I kinda like that it's not Iris having the premonition, or at least it's not explained like that. It's Stephanie having the premonition from Iris. But the whole scene just absolutely hits. It's definitely better than the last two premonitions, maybe even the premonition in the third film, I'm not sure. Also, they did something really creative by explaining why death is now coming for Stephanie and everyone in their family. I won't go into detail, but let's just say Bloodlines is a good name for this movie. Also, Stephanie is a very likable character in that they kinda hint she's going down the path of her grandmother and mother, but it's clear she only wants to help her family. The other characters are a mixed bag, and it's nice to see characters genuinely scared of death. The effects can sometimes be cheap, but I do give credit the deaths are still very creative and to an extent very viable. And of course, it gave Bloodworth and of course Tony Todd some much deserved closure. I do think if they ever do another Final Destination, it just won't be the same. Todd was amazing in these and he deserved this to be at least one of his last roles. To not give too much away, one of his last on-screen lines was about enjoying your time alive, as he would. It's honestly really touching, and I saw quite a few people get emotional seeing him. That being said, the callbacks were very creative. They reference Flight 180, there's a log truck in one scene, they even reference Clear Rivers. How do you do that? And it felt so natural. If I had one issue that really bugged me, I would say its ending is so abrupt. It kind of reminded me of the ending of the first film, which I also found very abrupt. I don't want to go too much into it since I still have at least 2 other videos to talk about this film, but just know, this movie truly brings it home and gives the fans a hell of a time.
I'll see you soon.
You know you make me wanna kick my head up and throw my head back and come on now, come on now, come on now, come on now, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy, a little bit softer now, a little bit softer now, a little bit softer now.